great. Here's Paul. Hi, Paul.
Hello.
All right, Oscar. Looks like we're all set.
Ready to go? Okay, I'm going to share my screen here. So we want to talk about the IDW process. How does that data get fed into the PIM, and what is the management that is required for the different mappings and such. And then after I'm done, I think maybe we should also talk about open items and status on each one of them. But on the IDW side of things, just kind of a big refresher. So the IDW files come in the form of an XML file. Here is an example of one. And Enable, PIM as a whole, does not support XML data out of the box. So there does need to be some transformation that needs to happen to take this data in its rawest XML format, the way it comes out of IDW, and essentially convert it into a flat file, so more of a spreadsheet type of data. So, and ultimately it gets converted into a CSV file.
Okay.
So for those come from, yes.
Did they not used to do a flat file? Did they go away from that?
Stacey, do you have any feedback on that?
They do have flat files, but the XML, I believe, is what was scoped out.
Okay, I guess scoped out. I mean, we can't switch to, if they're doing a flat file, can't we, and if it's easier for you guys or to get into PIM, can't we just do flat files?
Unfortunately, I think it's a little late to be having those discussions. We've already implemented the process. To answer your question quickly, you could. So if you get a flat file coming from IDW, you can certainly take that file and load it into the PIM. But based on information we had in terms of what we could use from IDW, this is what we came up with.
Okay.
Okay. So in terms of how you map the data from XML to the PIM is via a mapping spreadsheet that lives on the server. So this spreadsheet that I have pulled up right now is what allows you to map elements in the XML file to target output columns that you would ultimately feed into the PIM. So if you look at one example, for example, you have some output column name called Buy American Compliant. And where we find that data in the XML file is in this element called BAA, which is in the source element name column. Basically, what we have to define is the full path of where that element is. So if we look at the XML file, the product BAA, that would be under product, and then your element here is BAA. Okay, so your root is envelope, and then you basically have to include the path all the way down to where your element exists. That make sense for that one?
Sure.
Who said sure?
Dave.
Dave, okay. So that's how that piece works. There are some elements, for example, when you look at pack, where you have an element pack here, an element pack there, and there are different types of packs, and they are defined by some pack type. So for example, when we look at case total units is in that element called total units, but I have to select the appropriate element group for me to load into the appropriate unit. So I guess there must be some other, like each unit or something else, right? So this selection criteria, what it allows you to do is it allows you to select the data that you had in your element, in this case total units, but you are able to qualify it, so you're able to select it. So in other words, I only want the value of total units, but only if this criteria is met. So pack type has to be equal to 39, and pack description must be equal to case. Only then do I want to get the value of total, what was that, total units, and feed it into case total units. So similar, like for example, each gross weight, it is in the pack type element, but in this case, it's the pack type needs to be equal to G55 to know that the value for that gross weight needs to go into the appropriate dimension there. I guess there's probably other ones in here like case gross weight, I would assume.
Okay, so now we're going to have to go through stuff like this every time?
No. This is your mapping spreadsheet, which has all of the mappings that you have already defined in the data model spreadsheet, and we've already moved them to this list. So this list is really only maintenance going forward. So if IDW adds another attribute, if you add another attribute that you want to map from IDW, that's about the extent of your maintenance for the spreadsheet.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So we've already taken the work, and maybe Stacy's been helping me out on providing me with the mapping. So the mappings are done as of the last round of the data model spreadsheet. Going forward is just maintenance.
Okay.
So that said, this spreadsheet now lives then, it lives on the server. So if you want to maintain a spreadsheet, you want to add an additional attribute mapping or remap something, maybe you've renamed abrasive material to something else and you want to map it to something else, and you just come in here and make the change to that mapping. There's some other magic that's going on behind the scenes here. So, and that's basically the lookup to the DSG appropriate vendor number. So IDW contains a field called IDW public ID. So this is the unique ID for Bridgeport in the IDW data set. Obviously this IDW public ID, although it's important because it provides us with the identifier, the unique identifier, it doesn't help you because you don't think of this vendor as vendor number 10992. You have your own vendor number for Bridgeport. That's maintained here in this tab called Dakota Vendor Number Lookup. So in this Dakota Vendor Number Lookup, you have the IDW Manufacturer Public ID. That's the one that's coming in from your XML file. And you have the corresponding Dakota Vendor Number. So this is your vendor number that corresponds to Bridgeport, that corresponds to Pass and Seymour and LeGrand. So I took a wild guess based on the list you sent me, Dave, of your vendor numbers. I looked at the name of the vendor, the two vendors that we're that we are testing with, Bridgeport and LeGrand. And these are the vendor numbers I came up with. So if that's inaccurate, it's just a matter of changing this value to the appropriate one.
Nope, those actually look right.
Cool.
Looks right, doesn't it, Brian?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So the other piece of maintenance, of course, then when it comes to this spreadsheet, will be adding additional manufacturers from IDW and then your appropriate vendor number here. It doesn't care about this vendor name. I just put this in here as reference. It really only cares about this column and this column when it does that lookup. Okay.
So now, will that be up to us to load the rest of those in, or can we send here's a list of all our vendors, let's just preload everything?
Somebody is going to need to get a list of, and I think, Stacy, I don't remember if you got a chance to hear back from IDW, but if you could get a big list of all the manufacturing IDs and corresponding names, and then somebody's going to need to take that list and match it up to the Dakota list.
Okay.
Yeah, I can provide the public IDs. I believe I might have that, so I'll put that down as an action.
Cool. So somebody can just take, those IDs, and I'm assuming they'll have the IDW name too, so that you can plug in the rest here.
Okay.
Okay. So this spreadsheet again lives on the server, and on the server there is a directory already defined for this. It is the directory called Interworks Shared IDW. That's where this sheet is at. So if you need to make modifications to it, grab that file, make a change on your local, and then redeploy it back to the server. So just override whatever is there. All right. So with that said, there is, as I mentioned, there is some pre-processing that needs to happen to take that XML file and convert it to CSV and get that loaded. There's already some processes that have been implemented, and actually we've run some test files already on here. So if you go to dev, you're going to see some thousands of data there coming in from those two files, Seymour and Bridge. What was that? Bridgeport. Yep. So let me show you a little bit of what's going on behind the scenes, and then we'll go ahead and kick one off here real quick. So under the scheduled imports repository, there's a whole bunch of stuff in here, so ignore most of it for now. There's 3 of them that are at play here when it comes to the IDW file. The IDW submission scheduled import, you notice it is a custom type, so it's a type custom. And all that's doing is it's doing the transformation from XML to CSV, and then it's doing that VLOOKUP, or that lookup, sorry, for the appropriate DSG vendor number. And once it comes up with that, basically what we end up with, if you look at the columns in the output for the IDW feed, we have about 1,200 plus columns that are mapped. When it comes to SQL Server, it doesn't always have the best support for very, what I call wide files. So we would, and ultimately basically what we end up with is a file with 1,240 columns, well, 1,239 if you exclude this top one. But we end up with 1,239 columns, which is not well handled by SQL Server or really the application as a whole. There is a maximum of what the size of each row needs to be when we're actually loading data. So the answer to that is basically to split the file into 2. So the first half contains columns something like A through L, and the other file contains, columns M through Z. But that's all done automatically. You don't really have to worry about much there. It's already set up. You don't need to worry about it. It's more FYI for you in terms of what really is happening behind the scenes. So when this IDW submission job completes, what happens is it actually kicks off the other 2 jobs, or actually the first one, the split file part 1, and then split file part 1 basically kicks off part 2. Okay, so all that's doing again is it's taking that super wide file and it's breaking it up into 2 files so that it's, we don't have over 1,000 columns in a particular import file. So for the IDW submission, all it really cares about is that there is a file in whatever directory we decide it needs to live in this particular case, in that same IDW directory. It's going to look for any XML file and it's going to process that XML file. How we get the files into this directory, we can determine how this works. Right now it's been very loosely configured in that right now I have to actually do one of 2 things. I either have to physically place that XML file in this directory on the server, so that's one way to do it. Or we did actually set up for you an upload page so that what it does is it actually kicks off this IDW submission via the UI so that you don't have to go into the server and place the XML file. So under the home page, since you guys are, I think everyone on this call is an administrator, you will have this shortcuts. This shortcut now contains a new shortcut called IDW import. So in this IDW import link, takes you to this page where you can actually select your XML file from wherever you have it. So in this case, I already have one. So if I go here, I already have an XML file saved, my Bridgeport one, as an example. So you select your file on your local, and then you submit it. What that's going to do is it's going to kick off that IDW imports. Here you see previous versions that I ran. Looks like I ran some earlier this morning. So I submitted an XML file, and then what it did, again, that's the custom one that transforms it to CSV. And then once it's done, it kicks off the other two, part 1 and part 2. And for both part 1 and part 2, you're going to see how many records actually got processed. So you'll see there was some records that were updated. So I went ahead and deleted some Bridgeport data so that we could see it imported, so that you could see here the difference. So I'll go ahead and submit it for now. Down here at the bottom, it's saying it's best to upload it. Could be a big file, so it could take a while to upload, but ultimately you end up with this prompt that says it's been initiated. And then you'll see that job here as processing your first line and the date of when you kick that off. Okay. So while that's running, let me also talk through an alternate method of submitting it. So we talked about how you have this method by going into the UI and submitting the file. The second method is to actually configure the scheduled import so that it goes out and it fetches the file from an FTP site. So under the import details, what I could do is I could set up this file so that it actually processes it, but not from a file source, but from an FTP source. So if I set this to FTP and I put in all my information here, so the host FTP server, if there's a specific port, what's the username and password, what is the path for me to go get that file, what is the name of the file to grab. It does use a wildcard, so you could use an asterisk to go get the file. But this is how we could define it as well, so that you don't have to A, place the file manually on the server, or B, have to go in and submit it manually through here. That is another method that we can take. So at that point, again, you could even in terms of setting, I think based on the discussions we've had so far, you weren't actually thinking of putting this on a schedule, but if you did want to do that, you certainly very easily could by just setting up the appropriate FTP information and then setting a schedule for it to run on a daily or whatever basis that you want to run it in. That make sense so far?
Yep.
Okay. So for now, again, you could either place the file directly on the server, and I think, Stacy, you might have FTP details, and we can try this out with those FTP details when you have those. I think you got some revised ones, so we can certainly test that out. Okay, back here to my page, I'll click refresh. Okay, so notice that it already kicked off and completed part 1. And in that case, it processed a total of 285 records. It updated some, but here's the 10 that I deleted for fun, just so that you could see it. So it did actually create 10 records. So the next part, I would not expect to create records because they were already created as part of 1. So we should only be able to see the number that it actually updated. It's once it's done here. So just kind of timing it, in timing it, it looks like it's taken about 5+ minutes per submission, but the Bridgeport is the smaller of the two. The other one is the bigger one. Okay. So that one is still processing, but that's basically the process as a whole. You're not going to see this in QA just yet. I have basically a trigger to pull here at the end of the day. So starting tomorrow, in QA, you will be able to test this process as defined. Again, whether you want to use the submission page or whether you want to place the file directly on the server, just know that it needs to be in the shared IDW directory. So you would place the XML file in here. Questions?
Will you guys have like you know, little cheat sheets on, you know, like where things are hiding at and kind of, you know, step-by-step things. If you want to do this, you know, this is the process type thing, because there's no way I'm going to remember all this.
That's something that we typically rely on companies to put together their own procedural documents. But it sounds like, Stacy, you're recording this, right? So you can have this as a reference to build those procedures.
Yeah, this is recorded.
Okay. So again, not much to it. Once you're ready to start test those FTP directories, we can certainly help, or even Kevin, I think you've got some experience in setting up those schedules as well on the imports, but reach out if you have any questions or need help on that side of things.
Oscar, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So in the import process, if there was some data that came in that wasn't mapped in the resource files that you shared, would that appear in the errors column?
No, this is if there were errors in the upload. This is
Okay.
if there were errors in the upload, yeah. You can analyze the resulting file that came out. So you can grab this file and pull it into CSV so that you can look at all the columns and see if there's any data in them or not. So let me show you real quick here. So when the file gets picked up, it ends up in this imports folder. And here's that IDW file that got created via the custom process. So it'll just say IDW dash whatever date time that happened. So I could take this file. And if I wanted to confirm what actually got data, then you have all the columns in here. So all the columns that you defined in the mapping file, which is this guy here, will show up in the file whether or not there's any data. So you can always, kind of take a quick gander and see what did have data. And the reason there isn't anything here that tells you, hey, there's nothing there is because whether or not there's data is going to be dependent on your file, on your data type, on your product type. So because these are category attributes, turn on type is not going to be pertinent to every product type. It's only going to be pertinent to some. So you're not always going to find an actual match in the XML file. That answer your question?
I think so. I'm thinking through it.
Sure. Any other questions, comments on IDW stuff? Okay. So I'll just stop it right there. And again, I'll send you just an email probably tonight or tomorrow morning when this stuff is ready to test on QA. Most of it is queued up already. I need to restart services and there's a trigger I need to pull there. I didn't want to kick anybody out, so I'll do that tonight.
Okay. All right, and so the other items, if there isn't any questions right now on the IDW piece that we went through, we wanted to take a couple minutes to kind of touch base with you guys to see how things were going with the items that we talked about on our last call. So like the new item request form, I know you were going to try and get together and get through that and determine what fields were necessary that needed to be configured and added to the data model. What's the progress on that?
I don't believe Brian has really had any time whatsoever here. I know he wants to get together with, I think, Paul and myself and go through that. I just know both he and Paul have had some substantial things pulling on their time in the last several days. So
we've been doing a lot with the board, and tomorrow we've got the executive team meeting. It's not been a very good week, and this week is not very good either, and it's probably been the worst it's ever been for me personally in the years I've been here.
Sounds like we're all having fun, huh?
I was just thinking that, guys, oh gosh.
Bad, but I mean time available is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Understood. So I think, so that one I think we're, once you deliver that and we work through that, I think it's going to be a relatively quick change, kind of depending on what you come up with. So in terms of, from the project perspective, I don't see it as a big hold up. We definitely need it before we go live, right? But I think in terms of wrapping up the testing, it shouldn't hold us up too much, I think, Stacy. So I think from as long as we can get all the stuff tested that we have by the end of this week, but in terms of your imports and your exports, we should be okay to take whatever feedback you gave us from the new items form and quickly deploy them. And there should be very little that you'll have to test from that aspect of it, right? Once we put it into, we take your spreadsheet and we kind of clean it up to determine, okay, what exactly is going into the PIM in terms of an attribute. All you should really be testing after that is really that to make sure that you can get to those fields. Everybody can edit them as they're supposed to. So not much, I'm hoping, once that's there.
Okay, good. Yeah,
which probably moves us to the more critical ones, which would be like your revised master item file and getting us a revised set of all the files for a dry run load into QA. That I think is the next critical.
Yep, getting a new set of files down to Kevin now, or working on it anyway.
Cool. So you'll have what you need by, I guess, to get started on that stuff, Stacy and Kevin, when do you think you'll be starting that if you get your files today?
Tomorrow.
Cool. So that's the master file and all the files, right?
Yeah, yep.
Okay, cool. So how about the workflow testing? Have you guys been that enough and are comfortable with how things flow and everybody had the permissions they needed, or do you still need a few days to wrap that up?
I think Paul and I are probably the only two that have actually tested the workflow, and that was what we reported on the other day. So I think the next real serious round for us would be once the new item add fields are in there properly. So I don't know that we'll have much to report until then.
Okay.
Is that fair to say, Paul?
Yeah, from what I've seen, I'm comfortable with, and I think our changes after our discussion next week aren't real earth-shattering. It's just going through that process and saying, absolutely need this. This would be nice to have, like we were talking about. And if there is any field that serves a purpose or not, to add or remove.
Okay. So after you had some questions about permissions for pricing and such, all squared away then?
Nope, I tie right back to what's been going on here, and my time has been taken away. So soonest I see myself looking is tomorrow afternoon if our meeting doesn't go into extra innings.
Okay.
And that was to go through the permission piece?
Yeah, that was just my pricing profile,
Yep.
and the things that I was having issues with.
Okay, good.
Even going back to what I saw in August. I was just going to say that even what I saw going back to August, as long as I was able to do some of the things I wasn't then, you know, I'm comfortable with it because I saw what was going on. I knew at some point I'd had the authority discussion, so I wasn't too concerned about it, like I said last time.
Okay, cool. So the other critical thing, so last week was meant to be workflow testing week, so it sounds like we got most of that tested. That's good. This week, what we had lined up was your imports and export testing. So import being we only have one ongoing import, which is your IDW. So that'll be the IDW testing that you do. And then also your initial load testing. So by testing, really what we mean there is that you've confirmed that the mappings that you provided in the data model spreadsheet are what actually ended up in the PIM, right? So as Kevin loads all your files, your master file, your descriptions files, all of the files you're providing him, you're going to want to review the PIM data, whether you want to generate exports to review the data, however you want to confirm the data that was loaded. That is the goal of this week, for you to confirm, yep, we loaded everything, we initialized all the data according to our specifications, meaning your specifications, your mappings, on the initial load side of things. And then secondly, then you're going to also want to confirm, validate, sign off on all of the exports that were generated for you for your integration. So whatever files Kevin is putting together, you're going to want to just kind of give us the green light to say, yep, good to go, or no, there's something wrong here, fix this or fix that. And the goal to get all that wrapped up, all your testing done, and your feedback was the end of this week for that. Giving us next week to rectify any issues that you may have uncovered in your testing. Then we have next week allocated for that piece.
Well, I'll try to find time this week then and check out each file layout compared to the PIM, so won't make any promises, but I'll try.
Yep, that's the goal, by the end of the day, Friday, to have your feedback. So, and we can always touch base again if we need to realign our target dates. We can talk about that.
Okay.
And just to kind of preview, if I'm sorry to stress everybody out with all of this, but just to kind of paint the picture going forward. So we'll confirm our imports, exports this week. And then, like I mentioned, next week, then we'll spend some time on addressing any issues that may have come up. And then we begin our cutover planning, our dry runs, our cutover planning then really begins the week of the 27th. So that would be the week after next, where we start to look at, okay, what do we need to do to flip the on switch? Right now we have it on the map as Tuesday, December 5th is our go live date, which means Kevin would need to get your files ready for loading by that weekend of, Saturday or Sunday the 3rd, so that he could spend all day Monday doing the loads, and you're ready to flip the switch that evening. Again, once we kind of reconvene, we should kind of reevaluate some of those dates and kind of take it from there.
Okay. Yeah, we'll have to have an internal powwow, I guess, on it and see if we're actually going to make these dates.
Okay.
Yeah. Brian needs to be part of this just to kind of understand it. It sounds like there's a lot of things getting jammed up in a short amount of time here.
Yeah.
Sounds good. So maybe we should have a quick touch base then, see where we're going, how we're doing maybe Wednesday or Thursday?
Of this week?
Preferably, or do you want to do Friday? I mean, I leave it up to the team. What I don't,
yeah.
what I would not like to do is go all week without chatting to see how we're doing. So if you'd rather do it via email, what's the best way for us to kind of regroup on these dates?
Yeah, well, we need Brian as part of that. I know. He's got a commitment for part of Wednesday morning. I know he's got a commitment for part of the rest of Wednesday and Thursday, in addition to tomorrow being his exec team meeting. So I'm just not seeing that there's any chance for any of us to get together internally till at least Thursday.
Okay.
Yeah, on Tuesday we have the executive meeting. That's pretty much all day. On Wednesday and Thursday we have software review of a new ERP system. That's 2 full days. On top of that, we've got the new hire orientation we have to present at. And me personally, I've got a minor medical procedure, so I'm out part of Thursday and all day Friday.
How about
they can handle
then?
lobotomies that easy, huh?
Someone like me, it is easy. Just point a gun at me.
So what do you think then about, Stacey, do you want to maybe just reach out to Brian and see if maybe we can just get an email update by Thursday or Friday? Just an email update, just how we're doing. And Brian has got the dates that we just kind of discussed, so maybe get his feedback on, you know, hopefully maybe by the end of this week, if some of these dates are slipping, just kind of get a new ETA from him so that we can kind of plan our next sort of marching orders here.
Yeah, I can definitely do that.
Cool.
Okay. Anything else, team? Is there any other questions or concerns that you guys want to talk about?
Not that I can think of anyway.
Okay. All right. I will get that email out to Brian and we'll get everything coordinated. And then I guess in the meantime, Dave, you're working on getting those files over to Kevin and we'll keep you in the loop on how that's going with getting them loaded. And so you can check everything out. So you guys are all aware once all the data's in there so you can validate the mappings and all of that. And then I'll just kind of keep in touch with you guys and kind of check progress, and I'll see from Brian about the dates and that.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
Well,
okay.
thanks, everybody.
Well, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Brian Tibbles
has left the meeting.